Okay, so welcome to the Creator 3.1 release overview webinar. In this webinar, we want to bring you or demonstrate you quickly some of the new features that have come up in this new major release of Conformiq Creator. In terms of the overview, the main highlights of this release have been some additional features for business requirement modeling. Now, this feature has been initially released with Conformiq Creator 3.0, and in this version, there have been some major enhancements that allow now, for example, to add additional types of actions within business activities, or also to specify models already with combinatorial data, just using pure business requirement modeling. Then, of course, there has been a number of things on the user experience we have been working on, and these are again mainly related to business requirement modeling. I will go through these in more detail. And also, there has been for some time some issues with our find and replace functionality, and I will just shortly demonstrate that this is back in order since actually already the last release. And finally, again, integrations we're always working on, and here I will just highlight two of the innovations that we have in the integrations to show you some new advances there. So, business requirement modeling features. So, when business requirement modeling, that is the ability to create business activities, was first released, basically the only two actions the users could specify was a when and a then action. So with this release, we have introduced some more actions that allow you to just use pure business requirement modeling and don't need to break out to create activity nodes with classic requirement actions, etc. So these three actions have been added, and we'll demo you some of them in just a moment. And then another important feature has been to introduce the ability to specify combinatorial data as part of business activities. So value parameters set so far allowed only to specify one value per field for each value set. So this has been extended that now you can actually specify multiple alternative values. And then similarly as with the combinatorial action that's available for activities, already within a business activity, you can specify different strengths of interaction. So for example, take all pairs or take all combinations of the specified parameters. So with that, let me switch to the tool. Actually, here I've already opened our example model that you will see in the tool has actually changed slightly because of this new feature. So actually, when you just open and install the car booking business requirement model, what you can see there's already requirements in the model, and as always, this works by navigation. So for example, the review request you see here, this is a requirement action which is actually part of the business actions. One thing you will also notice is that you will now see always when and then actions. Previously, in the previous versions, when you created a business activity node, this was just empty, the business actions. Now we are actually always showing the actions that are in there. So for example, here we have entered a requirement evaluate requests is covered in case I complete these business actions, and just like any other action, I can actually freely move this around in the position as to when it is actually covered. 1 second. So up. So now it's in the first place. Now it's moving to the last place. And again, I mean, I can here either specify my ad hoc requirements, or similarly, if I attach a requirement provider, I can also link the requirements coming from an external source, such as ALM or Rally, or which is called the CA Agile Requirements Center, and or Excel for that matter. So that's a requirement action. And so what we can also do, just to show you how this works, so when you right click on business actions, you can basically add this. So let's say I want to add a name tag action here because I have actually an outcome here that is quite interesting for me also in test case naming. So I have these cases where I can either have data where a request is valid and it's approved, or it's incomplete and then it's not approved. So this, I think, is worthwhile for me to be part of my test case name. So what I can do is I can just go right click, name tag action, and then in the name tag action I can look for, this is this here, for example, I can say it's the outcome that I want to have in the name tag, and I can save, and then I can take it through my normal cycle where I generate the tests, for example. So now what you will see is that the test case names here, which are generated, are actually using the outcome which is used by the request activity. Excuse me. See, so here actually we have two tests. One test is actually going once to this activity, and actually another test is going twice. This is why it's first approved and then not approved. So this gives you an idea that these actions, how these actions work. They work exactly in the same way as for regular activity nodes. And again, simply right-click and add the action and then fill it out. So this is the this here is the these actions. So the next thing that I want to demonstrate is, for example, these new values. So for example, when I have registration, as we know, when people rent cars, usually there's this question as to how old are you, and what is your gender, and they have certain costing policies based on that. So let's just do that here as an exercise. So let's say we add an age parameter, and then we add, for example, the gender. So now if you have actually noticed here, there's something interesting. I can actually now see how this will actually be rendered. This is another thing on usability, that even though these are automatic actions, we're showing these actions as you write them, and as you see, I've added two parameters. These two parameters will go into the when action. This is now all automatically composed as I go. So then, for example, I want to say, okay, age groups, I have different ones. And now here's the trick. Usually I would use new string value, but now I have a new choice in 3.1, which is alternative string values. So in here I can say below, let's say 18, that's one choice. And let's say 18 to 25, that is one group of drivers. And then that says that's 25 to 40. And then these guys above 40 we can trust, no problem. So 40 plus. And then gender, for example, here again, same thing. I need to click on this and then select alternative values, and then I can say, let's keep it simple. There's more genders these days, but let's, oh, sorry, female. Okay, so now basically here you see, I have now specified that I want to see test cases that cover each of these, right? So as such, alternative string values work in the same way as they work in input constraints for regular input actions. So if I now again just go to test case generation, you will see that my test cases now become a bit more, because it's no longer possible to cover, all these data values with just two tests. Okay, so actually here, because I'm using the name tag now, let me just remove this for a second, because the name tag is now preventing us to see this quite easily. But I mean, of course, this is a detail. Let's go back to here, generate test cases. Okay, now we have new names. So, by the way, this new icon here, for example, shows you when the tool has determined a better name. And that's, by the way, a feature that has been around for a long time, but this is what the N is for. So for example, here we see now there have been some tests specifically generated. And also if we go here to the data objects and the register request, right, then we are getting also the same kind of traceability that we get otherwise in input constraints as to where is each value in which tester is each value covered. Okay, but now we still have not done combinatorial data. Combinatorial data, to take it to the next level, we go back to the modeling perspective, and then there's this new field here, which is basically saying combinatorial interaction strength. And this, of course, only makes sense in case you use alternative string values and you have at least 2 fields specifying. Otherwise, there's no combinations to take. So if I double click on this, again, I get the choices. So you can choose between all pairs and all the way. So this is a global option. So let's say you have here, you know, multiple when and then actions, and each of them have parameters, and it applies to each one of them individually. So, okay, I select the pairwise, I click save, I load the model again. Now what you will see is that a new category will appear here underneath the conditional branch, which is the combinatorial data, and it will see that here, okay, there is all the combinations that are applicable, and once I generate test cases, then I will see my number of tests increase even further, because now, as we see, these 3 tests, for example, have been missing. They've not been covered initially by the initial test set, and we have some new, better names proposed that we could choose, and here we see 3 more tests have been added in order to cover pairwise. So this, in a nutshell, is very simply how this works, and the idea here was this to be very simple, and this is how I've been trying to present it. Okay, so these are the 2 major features when it comes to the new features. Then we have some enhanced user experience. You have already kind of seen it a little bit. It used to be actually called initially implicit when and then actions. You would not see them. Now we see them, and we call them automatic actions. And basically, this allows you to see live any changes you do to the activity name or the parameter sets, and then we'll include it in the automatic text. And then if to some point, if you decide the automatic text is not good enough for you, or you want to add more when and then actions, then you need to switch to customized when and then actions, and that's a conscious step, as I will show you. And then finally, also a very useful feature has been in the past, recollecting which kind of data values have been available has been manual effort, and now we have automated that when you specify decision nodes that you have actually, or any kind of condition for that matter, you can easily see what kind of values have been specified. I will demo that, and then finally there's the find and replace. Let's go to the demo part. So the first thing is the automatic actions. So I've shown that before. So right now I cannot edit this because it's automatic. So whenever I change my name of my activity, right, so then this changes. Whenever I add a parameter, we've seen this changes. And this is the automatic thing. This is when you just want to get started. You drag and drop, the business activity nodes just on the canvas as you want them. You type something in them, and then this automatic text will be produced automatically. When you then get to a point where you want to say, like, okay, actually, I can write this much better, I need another when action, you right click on it, and then basically you say customize when and then. And now basically you get a different menu, and now you can add your own when actions, which again, go back to the normal editor. My next thing to do, up, and so on. So now I've added an additional action, and I can change the order. I can add anything more. I can add requirement actions. I can add narrative actions, name tag actions, anything. So if you want to kind of drop back to this original automatic action, the thing is that here you really need to, this is also a conscious thing. That means you are willing to throw away. You can also go back to this automatic mode, but we believe this will probably rarely happen. Now, the second point that I was trying to mention was that, for example, when I'm writing these decision diamonds, right? So here's a review request, which is either in the review approved or not approved. Now, how do I know what was in that business activity? What were the values that were available, right? So the thing is here again, if you have this blank, so you don't know what to put here, now there is this feature here that you get the choice which says, well, the outcome values, it already knows. You selected the outcome from the review request, and you have these 2 choices that you can select from. And there's no need to copy and paste or look up, etc. But this is obviously updated when I change my set my actual values here in my value set. So this is a very neat feature which allows you to be even more faster, you know, in creating decisions, and it should come in very useful for you. Okay, so this is basically about the automatic actions and their customization, and then we've had the usability feature around the values. And I believe now we are at a point where I wanted to basically just demo the find. Yes, so find, it is like not rocket science. If you press Control F and you start typing something, for example, register, then it will start finding register in the model. Okay, here I only have one request. And this, of course, works in all kinds of models, you know, also not only business requirement models, but it goes to the whole diagram and finds it there. And if I, for example, have here a structure diagram, Control Find works just the same way. So, for example, if I go for user, it finds me anything that is connected to user, and you can do also replies and all these kind of things. So this has been a feature that has been early on the tool, but for some reason actually was for some releases not easily available. So now this is back and very useful. Okay, this brings me to the last section of my demo, and then I will let you go, which is the integration enhancement. So here again, a lot of things have happened. I would encourage you to read the release notes. So we have, for example, some things here not covered in this demo are the IBM Focus tool integration, where you can generate for example, model artifacts from test plans generated by IBM Focus, and various others integrations or updates have been performed. But the few things I wanted to highlight are really two major things. The one thing is the test reverse engineering has had a major update. So models look now very different compared to what you used to before 3.1. And then we have the object locators. We have a new support. Actually, the support itself has been in the tool for a long time, but we have not been actually using it, and I will explain it in a moment. So basically, you can track object repositories, for example, for GUI models that model with GUI interfaces. You can track them actually in your structure diagram, and which basically removes the need to maintain them externally, and you can use your model as your single source of kind of object information. These two things I want to demo here as the last part, and then I will go to the questions. Oops, this was the wrong one. So yeah, let's maybe, okay, let's start with the reverse engineering. Let's create a new project. Sorry, new project. Reverse engineering, where we are just going to keep that empty for the time being. So here's a new project and I want to get started. So for example, let's say I have some Excel test suite. So I want to actually import Excel manual tests. So if nothing has really changed here, the interface is still the same. I select the file, I select, excuse me, I select the row number, and then I basically click the import button, and the same dialogues, the same optimization happens. But what happens now is that when we look at the generated activity diagrams, they look very different now. So maybe if I want to lay this out a little bit, then it becomes even prettier. Zoom 200%. So basically, in the past, we have used to generate by default event nodes followed by so-called continue custom actions, which have been preceding various activities. In some cases, even some extra activities have been added to handle certain cases. All of this is now eliminated, and the new style of modeling with decision nodes is used, where the logic is basically fully defined and steered by the test case number that this block is used in. So just this as such is not something new. It has been done like this before. It's just that it's now much more direct, right? So for example, here you can see that, you know, the test case 1 that we imported goes first to go to admin and then clean database. Test case 2 as well as 3, 4, and 5. Sorry, 3 and 5 are going to click register link, and then it continues from there, and these tests then go other paths to the end until they end. So this is a new way of doing things. We believe that has simplified things. Of course, when this is an import of 5 tests, of course, if you import 500 tests, you may have quite a bunch of errors outgoing here from the decision node. But again, this is normal. And again, it reflects the complexity of what you're trying to import. So as we have always been saying, is like we don't advise to import large test sets, but rather look for groups of tests that belong together, and try to keep a reasonable number when you do import from manual test cases. A similar change has been done to the Gherkin importer, and maybe I just show that as part of this project as well. So in the Gherkin, when we import Gherkin feature files, we have already earlier added a feature that we can import these files as business requirement models. But now we have again changed a bit some of this logic, and here we're importing where we're seeing that actually in this reverse engineering now, that even for the Gherkin we're 100% that we are actually identifying steps in the feature files. Previously we have been analyzing the files based on scenarios, but now we have been, similarly as for manual tests, also been adopting approach that each when and then clause together become a step. So in a business activity, instead of clubbing all of these steps in a scenario into a single business activity. So these are some important changes because they make it easier to read the diagrams and makes them easier to follow. There's less clutter, there's less custom actions produced, and there's less code also here, because in the previous versions, again, there was a lot of actions with blocking preconditions generated after event nodes, which is all now taken care of and cleaned up. And again, if you're working with these models and you want to change that they're not based on the test ID but some other means, feel free to edit it and change that logic. Okay, so this is the major update in the reverse engineering. Another interesting thing that I want to show you now is the annotations. So for the annotations, actually, what has happened already previously, let me just close a few things here, is that we've had these structure diagrams for a while, but actually there is also another file which we usually don't edit, which can be used to contain more information. So if you see that here, that line, for example, we can have information from the object repository, for example, that our username field here has a Selenium identifier, locator type is ID, called user, and we can actually add them to these files. Now, these SL files are usually files that we don't advise users to modify, but instead importers to extend and to modify. So for that purpose, also a lot of integrations have been developed on the importer side to create these annotations and add them. So if you're importing Selenium assets, you get these Selenium tags or annotations done for you. You don't have to do anything. And but the thing is, here at this level in this diagram, you still don't see any direct mapping. So the object repository information is not shown here, cannot be edited in any way. So when I click on the field, at this point, there's still no link that there is actually a Selenium locator attached to this field. This information is stored underneath. But anyway, so there's now some integration. So one example is, for example, our Selenium JavaScripter. So our Selenium JavaScripter used to always produce kind of object locator information based on the assumption that we're using ID and that the ID is exactly as the name in the structure diagram. But as you will see now, when we're basically going to generate tests and rendering them, so what we will see here is that now these object information that is in the in these annotations is actually preserved. So as you see here, the Selenium JavaScripter has this page object model. And if you now look at some of these files here, let me, oops, sorry, go here. That, for example, we were talking about the login, the login page here. So one second. So here's the username where we're seeing the ID is used in user. And similarly, you know, the same goes for the password. Here's the ID is password. And by default, if we would not have these annotations, it would actually base them based on the names of the elements. So now when the importer creates these annotations and the scripter puts it out, that means there's really nothing left to do to execute these test cases. Previously, the last step was to map these objects to their real names. So with that, we close a loop, which not only saves you time from maintaining the object repository outside of Conformiq, but it also helps you to get much faster to test automation. And then finally, my last demo, in the minute that it goes into the overtime, is just I want to show you another case similar, where I can just import an object repository. So let me call this new project now UFT. So let's say I have a UFT recording that I did of my application, which in this case will be ESD. And I want to show you now how this works, how fast this can go. So I go to import QTP assets. I browse to my files. I have my recording that my colleague has sent to me for the web UI, so I can open this, and then I can you know, create the structure diagram. Now this again has been in the tool for a long time, but what has not been there, give me just 1 second here, I'm going to do some cleanup. So one thing that's nice to do is to fix the layout a little bit that that this importer creates, and then we can arrange this a little bit nicer. So as we see, this is what comes from the recording, and you know, the recorder of course does not use humanly understandable names. So let's change even something and say here, okay, this is my main page, and this form is actually where I'm specifying my item. Okay. And then I see I have the same form recorded multiple times. That is not the problem of Conformiq, but this is actually a problem of the recorder. But okay, I don't have to take everything that it gives me. And here actually this is my landing page where my start link is. Okay, so now I've worked a little bit with whatever the recorder has just given me a raw out of the thing. I've not created a model yet. I'm just getting started. See, this page 5 even is empty. Okay. Fine. Now I can get going. So I've spent so far no time on structure diagram definition by hand, and now I say I want to shop. Okay. So now I'm starting my activity drawing process. I draw an activity node and call that shop. Okay. And then I have, of course, all these actions already pre-prepared for me. That okay, I have my landing page. No, I'm sorry, in the display landing page goes here, and I want to click on the landing page, the start link. Then I want to fill the item or form, and actually before I do that, I'm on the main screen. I want to verify that, and then I click finally the add button, and I click the checkout. Okay, let's just stop it right here. So now I've done the model. I can now go and load the model. I'm sorry, I first need to select this as the main diagram, load the model. And while I'm loading the model, actually one thing I'm going to do is that I'm ready to go to UFT. So I'm going to just attach the QTP Excel scripter, which is yet another scripter that is using these annotations. So now I'm generating my tests, which obviously will only give me one test. But the more interesting part is that now when I export the test cases, excuse me, I'm going to get actually data out here, especially the harness, again, which is completely pre-configured. So if I look at my OR mapping now, I see that I'm using the original names. Remember, I changed this to main and item. This is still the way how the recorder gave it to me, how the recorder can find the object. That's how I understand it. And again, these annotations or these object locator information has been basically been piped through via the structure diagram, where also here, if you would take a look at the SL file, here's the UFT annotations. Well, they're a little bit more complicated, but again, we don't have to worry about that. But basically, they are the basis again for carrying through this information all the way to Excel. And with that, I would like to close on this webinar. Sorry for the late start, but I hope it has been useful and you have been getting some ideas from the webinar. It's now open for some questions. And otherwise, please feel free to send us your questions to creator.support@conformiq.com.